this is a work session. I haven't signed up.
Okay, if you want to, you can speak on the back, or there's a sign in the back.
Okay, great.
All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is Vice Chair Carmen Matthews. Our Chair, Ariane Lyons, is maybe running a bit behind. So we'll go ahead and get this started. Let's start off with the roll call. Bill, would you like to start us off?
Bill Davis.
Coco Sutton, Parks Commission.
Carmen Matthews, Parks Commission.
Jamie Faraday, Parks Commission.
Kurt Benward, Parks Commission.
Greg Hamlet, City of Coos Bay.
Jennifer Worsing, City of Coos Bay.
Amy Edmonds, City of Coos Bay.
Christina Texera, City of Coos Bay.
All right. And we can go ahead and go to the next agenda item, which is public comment. Looks like we have one public comment signed up so far, and no one online as of yet, correct? Correct. All right, so Mike, you're up. Would you like to do your public comment?
I have talked with Greg about locating this kinetic sculpture. This is one illustration of where that might be placed on the north end of town where the traffic divides. And then this one here is on the south end of town by the Shell station where traffic divides again. And the location for it indicates this is behind a heavily rebarred concrete wall for crash protection. There's gravel in front of that river rock, so that
Sorry to interrupt, but
runaway truck line.
can you use the microphone so we can get everything you say recorded?
Okay, I have my notes.
Okay.
When I was on council, I didn't find the microphones to be very functional. But anyway,
The difference now is just that we have to offer it virtually, and so the only way people can see it virtually is if
I got
you
it.
speak into the microphone, as well as we use that for recording our meeting minutes.
okay, I'm Mike Vaughn, 598 North 4th Court, and I missed the deadline because of call to dig didn't respond over the holidays, and they have now. So all of the call to dig utilities have reported in. The only ones that show on these two sites are Northwest Natural Gas, yellow flags. So if you go by there, you'll see yellow flags on little steel wires, nothing else. So that kind of bothers me because on the north end, just across from the entry to the ale house, that intersection of the History Museum, there's a fire hydrant on this island. So I know there's some water there, but nobody indicated that. So I suppose that's water board. And so instead of counting on the call to dig number, 1-800 number, I should probably go by the water board and make sure that there's no conflict there. Anyway, I missed a deadline for proposing this to this group because of collecting utility information, and Greg asked me if I would be ready, and I said it would be really close, and then no, I could not. But I'm just saying this is what I'm working on, and the utilities have reported in. I got emails from all of them that said there's no utilities in that space, but they did not put blue paint on or red paint on or green paint on. They just said there was no conflict on that space. So I think it needs more confirmation, and that's all I'm here to say today. So those are originals.
I got a question I wasn't sure about this tangent line right here.
Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
It is not marked.
I didn't know if it was something underground, I mean,
Oh, I know what it
you know,
is.
because
It-
blue
no,
is usually.
That is storm sewer.
Okay,
There's
okay,
a storm sewer over here, storm sewer.
okay.
That's
And this is just a
That's right.
locate line,
And
okay.
the locate would be behind this heavily structured rock wall.
Okay.
So there'd be no crash, conflict. This is deep river rock, so
Mhm.
if a car goes into deep river rock, they can
Yeah.
flush in.
Okay,
That was intentional by ODOT and
thank you.
City of Coos Bay. Put something,
Right, thank you, Mike.
yeah, and need to keep those and work with the utilities.
All right, I think the other ones made their way down there.
Yeah, anyway, these are at scale, so everything can be, pardon me? Oh. Work in progress.
All right, thank you, Mike, for the update. All right, I don't believe we have any other additional public comments. So we can move ahead to item number 3, which is our work session. Alternative funding sources discussion is the first up. And I will go ahead and hand it over to Jennifer or Greg.
Go
whichever
ahead,
one.
yeah, I'll do it.
You'll do it?
Yeah, I'm pretty
All
good,
right,
yeah.
go for it.
At the August 1st, 2024 Parks Commission work session, the alternative funding sources was the topic of that session. The commission requested at that time that the topic be continued to this work session to further the discussion. Several ideas were presented during the initial discussion. Those topics included tax revenue, grants, volunteers, prepared food and beverage tax, public and private partnerships, the use of more than 1% of the gas tax, the creation of a foundation or a 501, a park and recreation district, possibly with North Bend, a development fee associated with permits were the topics that were discussed at that point in time. However, like I said earlier, the commission asked that we continue this conversation into this meeting. At the last meeting, we did assign tasks, or the commission did take on tasks. And we do have the list from that last meeting up in front of us with those assigned representatives next to the tasks. So turn it over to the commission to continue the conversation, to maybe throw out some more ideas. We can definitely jot them down. Maybe talk about what progress has been made on any of the research that's been done to date, or however you guys would like to take this conversation.
All right. Coco is ready to start us off.
Okay, the first, on this list before us, there was tax revenue, grants, and volunteers. I did prepare a document that was sent out to all the commissioners that had links. One of them was information on the districts for park taxing, which is under the Oregon Administrative Rules for Special Districts. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can read it for yourselves. But the pro is it would set up a permanent, and there's the key, permanent funding base. So whatever that permanent base is, if it's, you know, $1 per thousand of assessed value, it remains that. It's permanent, and to get it changed, there has to be a significant increase or decrease in the thing that's in the district. It does require a vote. If you don't hold the vote during a general election, there's more increased costs for that, et cetera. And that's, you know, but you have a base. It could be dedicated for employees, for parks and recreation, whatever you want to use in that. The con is it has to be staffed and managed properly because of the laws and the Oregon Department of Revenue reporting, et cetera. And one of the bigger picture expectations from taxpayers when you start adding additional taxes, there's the issue from the city side and the assessor's office for compression. And then there are expectations as to what exactly are you doing with that. In other words, some special districts specify that it's not for enhancing or increasing, it's specifically for For example, there's some where their tax basis for increasing or adding to their park trails or outdoor or watershed enhancement. Others prohibit using it for operational costs. Some people, they allocate a certain percentage for employees because you have the unfunded PERS issue that gets attached onto that district. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff with it. Other cities that have revenue and budget structure, I just put a couple of links in there for people because I've heard the mention of the city of Ashland. I put the population, how many parks and acreage. They have kind of a rocky history with that 20% of the all-city food and beverage tax. There's an article link that was there from the Ashland Chronicle on the history of that. And when they did that beverage and food tax, notice that 80% of that revenue tax goes to the city's wastewater plant, which because, you know, you're increasing the usage of people putting oils and things like that in there. It started in 1993. You will see that the 2022-23 budget had a $10.7 million deficit. I imagine that has to do with COVID, but you can look at it yourself because when you have a food and beverage tax, that's pretty much discretionary income, and when those are the hardest impact. Another one was the city of Lebanon, Oregon, which is a 19,690 with 300-acre park space. They have a revenue that charges for service, rentals, and other miscellaneous fees. They had a $3 million starting balance for 23-24 adopted budget. You can link and look at them. So it's nice to look at how other people are funding those sources. There was the permits for vending in city parks. And I gave some examples of Central Point, Oregon, which is probably closer to us. Of course, the city of Eugene has a robust program of that because of their, I think they're one of the longest running farmers markets in the U.S. that's year-round. But their population is, you know, many times what ours is. But Central Point, Oregon is 18,997, and they have a summer vending program at one particular park. And that was interesting to look at and note what their FTE is for their park. Even though they may not work all year, it's a 13-person full-time equivalent, so you may have a lot of seasonals that are working with specific tasks. For grants, the City of Coos Bay Public Works Department has an extensive list of grants that are available biannually or annually through Oregon Parks and Recreation as pass-through for federal, state, or Oregon Lottery or other funds. They're the biggest recipient and manager of funds for any of the federal or state or lottery dollars. The city hired a grant writer who has a list of other private grants, and they've been actively working those. The focus of grants can change, though, each year or period based on the focus of the grantors. For example, Fred Meyer Trust and some of the other grantors that had been in the area for decades had changed their focus after COVID from what they usually funded. So that's something to keep in mind. Just because someone's funding park and recreation or outdoor activities one season, the next year they could retool. City personnel still needs to allocate time for staff to provide extensive information and paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork with grants, and when you're looking at a feedback on how much return on investment or return on your assets that you're getting from a grant program, normally you're looking at a 5-year period, and that's because a lot of grants, by the time the cycle opens and you get the grant, it could be a 1 or 2 year period. Then when you actually get the grant, you have to implement the grant, and you're given a deadline for that. And then seeing what actually comes online and the either increase in users or fees or maintenance reduction. So if you don't have at least a 5-year timeline, it's really hard to see, you know, what that is. But we're in a period now where we're going into, I think, the 2nd year. So once we get some things done, that's something to keep in mind. The volunteer programs, there's many, many examples with federal, state, county, municipal, private organizations that provide outdoor recreation and, you know, camping and other opportunities for students and adults in those volunteer positions. They're varied from docents to junior ranger programs, interpretive programs, maintenance, camp hosting, property sitting, management of specific programs or events, or things like concerts, holiday or event programming, safety and risk partnerships with security, law enforcement, and they have memorandums of understanding or memorandums of agreements to achieve those goals with those individuals. The success of all these programs have one common denominator, is dedicated paid staff to oversee it. Because you're working with the management of a wide variety of people at different times, they can come and go, probably more than you do in your regular work situation. And I kind of bullet pointed a lot of the issues that can come up that need to be handled professionally to avoid litigation or workman's comp claims, et cetera. So those are the bullet points there. The pro on that is the labor is specific to needs as they arise. So if you have specific needs, you can get someone when you don't need them, you know, hey, thank you, we're moving on. You have an untapped market for skilled labor with retirees, which was the largest things that people tap into, because people who have licensing or technical trades already may already keep those licensings. You don't have to keep up with that. So electrical, plumbing, welding, carpentry, trails, CDL, equipment operators, pesticide and herbicide trainings, computer programming, database, newsletters, outreach, web design. So it's all over the board with that. The con is it's time-consuming for city staff for accountability. Same time for orientation and paperwork for other personnel that works at the city, but it's 3 or 4 times as much because of the turnover. Making sure there are specific written job descriptions and time tracking because of liability and subject worker issues, the oversight that not working outside of scope of job description, insurance liability, federal, state, municipal, and local laws and union contracts. So that's just kind of an overview. Any one of these things can be used and have been successful, but if someone wants to explore any of those, it's keeping in mind that you're matching one of those programs with something that you're already needing help with. And then do you have the capacity? Because there's very few of these options where the city is not going to have anywhere from at least 30% to 100% of capacity that's going to be needed. So that's my report.
Thank you, Coco. Chair Lyons is now with us, and I will hand the meeting over to her.
Thank you, Carmen. I apologize for my tardiness. Thank you, Coco, for putting this together. I really appreciate it. Any additional commissioner comments on what was presented or information that Coco delivered? Jamie?
I recall that the city used to have a volunteer coordinator at some point.
I think a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Thank you, thank you.
And what is the staff's interest in, if it's feasible to get another one on board, to have a volunteer coordinator for the parks or anything in the city's realm? Has it come up at all?
It has not come up.
I imagine having somebody to deal with volunteers would probably be beneficial. I wonder if there's any grants for paid staff in terms of like community outreach, which would be volunteer coordinator.
We haven't come across any. We were hoping to, actually, when we first started this about 1.5 years ago, trying to find grants to fund an FTE. We have not found one yet. And Coco's shaking her head.
Yeah, usually the funding for something like that would be if you were doing outreach in an underserved area and you were trying to increase the involvement of them in outdoor recreation. For example, Fish and Wildlife years ago had a Becoming an Outdoor Woman program that was supposed to be aimed at single parents with young children so they could get into that, and it ended up with single women that wanted to recreate and be outdoors, so it kind of missed the target and went by the wayside. So those are usually the only things you'll see for funding that kind of position.
And I apologize if it's already been run over, but in our previous discussion, I kind of like the idea of having a foundation, similar to what the library board does, and then having a volunteer coordinator that's part of the foundation, and that because it's not a city, a municipality, there are potentially more grant opportunities for that, and possibly, usually grant opportunities and grant funds are not for FTE. It's for stuff.
Yeah.
They want stuff. It's they don't like operations. They don't like maintenance. I think there's only 2 in our mega grant list that helps towards those. Everything else wants tangible items for their grant, or an increase in services.
Well, currently, we've allocated around 50 grand for a grant writer.
Correct.
At some point, if we were able to create a foundation, I wonder if a city liaison, like part-time, not an FTE, but a part-time individual, we could use maybe some of that funding to go towards community volunteer organization. I don't know. We need grant funding more than we need that. But so I was tasked with the foundation research, and I have not completed that yet. I apologize for that busy festival season in downtown Coos Bay. All these free events going on in downtown city.
In our vibrant community.
In our vibrant community. We do have a lot of things going on, which is great. And I have yet to pay a fee to participate in those in terms of to the city. So, that was one thing that was brought up was, fees for or permits, events. I don't think that would make enough, I think, to really do much in terms of our parks budget. But building permits wise, I think it would be helpful. And personally, just to kind of circle back around, I still am interested in this food and beverage tax. I know that's probably a really unpopular idea with the rest of the population. But I'm trying to figure out a way to, in my head at least, to wrap not just our population into paying for the built environment, the infrastructure, the parks infrastructure, but including those transient visitors who are coming through and dropping their money off here and enjoying our parks. And so the burden isn't always on just us. I'm thinking about wastewater, and wastewater accommodates many travelers throughout the year, but here we are as homeowners and local business owners, we are paying 100% of that. So if there's a way for us to encourage, or to envelop those transient visitors into helping us pay for our built infrastructure, I'm really interested in that. And the foundation, I think, is another great way to do that. I think that we could use that as a vehicle to organize a lot, but I don't know how much that's actually going to bring us in terms of dollars.
Well, Kurt, do you want to speak a little bit to the Library Foundation and how that operates and what you see as maybe a benefit or a con for this application?
Thanks for not putting me on the spot. Just in general, when I look at all of these options, and I went to the links that Coco was nice enough to put in there to see what these other localities were generating, and they didn't generate a lot of money in events and fees compared to the total budget that they ran for the parks. And so as I thought about this, I'm not saying this is what we ought to do, but I'm saying, I don't think a special taxing district is probably something that would happen, because all the parties that are involved that would be affected have to agree, and the climate for increasing any kind of property taxes, and I'm sure everybody in town eats out once in a while, but it's not the same onerous feel that you have sometimes with the property tax. And I agree with Carmen that when people come into town, then they help pay for it. So if they enjoy events in our city parks, like the music at the Bay tonight, with the train wreck playing, they help contribute to that. So I like that one. Now, foundations I like too, and the foundation works well for the library because since it's a 501c3, people get to donate and they get the tax break, and we send them little receipts. So there's some grants that we can write for that the city can't write for, and it's a lot easier if someone wants to give you a bequest from an estate when someone dies, to be able to pass that over to a foundation than it is the city. The foundation in the past has hired grant writers, You know, if we were looking for some grants for something, we would hire someone to write a grant for us. If it's a small thing, the foundation itself does it, but if it's a bigger project, we've hired grant writers. We've hired people to do surveys. So it works well. A downside for the foundation is that if it's like anything, if you don't have really active foundation board members, not much happens. You know, but if you have a few people that are active and willing to do some things, you can accomplish some stuff. I mean, we got a $2 million donation, well, I won't call it a donation, $2 million from somebody's estate, because they just wrote us into their will, and you can pursue that. You know, attorneys won't, you can talk to attorneys, they can't lead their client because of their fiduciary relationship one way or another, but they're always willing to make them know that those options are available. So, I like the foundations. For this, I like the food and beverage tax, even though it requires a vote. Those are my favorites. The other thing is, you know, halfway in between, if Carmen down at Seven Devils says, you know, every September on Tuesday, one day in month, and one day in September every year, we're going to give, you know, the net profit from the business to the foundation. So that gets away around from having the property tax. Maybe there are enough businesses would like to say, hey, I'm So It Goes Coffee, or I'm whatever human being, and we'll give the proceeds from one day's business to the foundation for parks. That gets around the food and beverage tax, might be easier to do too. So things to think about. Coco.
One thing that has never been brought up, and I've always thought of this, it's not going to go well with some people, but we have the city budgets and then we have 2 urban renewal budgets. A lot of cities, the wealth and the welfare of the cities are dependent on what people see when they come in, and certainly your public spaces, whether it's your streets, your sidewalks, your parks, are an indicator of whether or not something's cared for. One thing that I found interesting when I was looking over the history of the creation of Mingus Park, because that's the oldest park we have, is how it started out with funding for maintenance and repair and expansion. And then as the economy changed, the focus went and continued to go to things like urban renewal and economic outreach. But one of the things that I also noticed was there's an incredible amount of money that's spent for planning, design, things like that that never get implemented, and it's not just here, it's other places. And then at the end of the day, which is why a lot of places in California quit doing urban renewal, because it is deferring funding that you could be using for water, sewer, fire, life safety, park and recreation, the things that people originally depended on incorporating a city for. Garbage. So the question of the day that I've never seen is, what is the return on investment and then return on assets that we're getting out of the 2 urban renewal pots? Because, for example, on the Coos Bay Village, that's great because you have something that's being built up. It's going to be at current assessed value unless you cut some kind of a deal, which happens. And the unfortunate part is you create more urban blight because you're just moving things from one area of town to another instead of getting new things in. So it might be worth looking at the overall urban renewal budgets and saying, do we want to take some of that funding that's been diverted for that and start thinking about putting it back? Because remember, urban renewal is something from the 60s, late 50s, early 60s. So that's just something that has occurred to me.
Just to that point, I don't know how this works, you have very few parks within the URA districts. You have a portion of Toppets, and other than that,
The pre-pedway.
the boat ramps.
Yeah.
But
But I,
Boardwalk.
I think speaking to Coco's benefit, and if I misunderstood this, is by removing the urban renewal district boundary, those funds are coming into to the city in general, so they're not limited to a specific. And I'm not saying that because I pay 2 of them on my property tax bill.
Okay.
So you're talking about changing the boundaries?
Or removing in the urban
Or
renewal.
removing them, yeah.
Dissolution of.
What I'm saying is, over
dissolving.
time, this has come up in a lot of places that have done urban renewal longer. And what they find is you're constantly blighting one area of town and moving into another because you're adding investment incentives for people, which are not bad, but you have very few strings attached. So it just goes like, I built this, and then 20 years later, I'm rebuilding that, and it's moving things from one area to another instead of saying, wow, we have robust downtown, the Tioga building, the Chandler building, all these other things. And then you have a mix in there which happens of nonprofits where you have a partnership that the city owns a lot of buildings, so that's not on the tax roll. The whole point of urban renewal is you're getting new tax dollars because that's where your budget comes from. So all I'm saying is when you look at other areas that have been down this pathway, at some point you have to ask, what's your return on your investment per dollar and the assets that are in there to achieve the goal originally of urban renewal? And I've never seen that written down. So over time, as you have an encumbrance on those urban renewals because you have bonds behind them, et cetera, when those start coming to the end of life, can you look at hard on that and say, do we want to keep doing this over and over because we have it, or do we want to start decreasing that and maybe looking back at sewer plants, fire life saving, streets, parks? That's just a thought, because that's where a lot of your capital funding is. So, and like I said, that's just an opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a.
It's not new revenue, you've already got that base.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, while I will say that I've enjoyed working with the urban renewal funds, and, you know, it's obviously a pot of money that gets to be used and has influence and value and does do work and real things. I'm not sure if it's the best return. It is a good question to ask. And that is something, well, I mean, the urban renewal district will come to term, and I can't remember how many more years we have left on that. But at some point, it will come to term, and you can either, I guess, redo it or dissolve it. I'm not exactly sure of how that operates, but, I mean.
It's covered under your, it's a special district, for
Yeah.
lack of better words. So
It
the
has
issue is the
term.
encumbrances that you have in them, do you have to keep redoing them, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Okay, because I can have an urban renewal that's got a $50 million budget. Does that mean I have to use all that $50 million, or can I be looking at that $50 million that's still coming from your tax base, from the assessment? And can I say, instead of us looking and approving that budget for $50 million if we don't have bonds and encumbrances, can we cut some of that back and start refunding things? Because that money came from somewhere to begin with.
Yeah, I think you would
Okay.
have to get rid of the urban renewal.
Well, there's ways to redo them. It doesn't mean you have to dissolve urban renewal per se. It's how much of your money are you diverting to urban renewal in that district? That's a base. It's a tax base. So all I'm saying is, thinking long-term, all that money, you didn't have an urban renewal 60 years ago or 50 years ago. That money came by diverting funding from something else, okay? And you can see in your city what was the opportunity cost of that. And if you're not getting enough return on the investment and the assets because you're just moving from blight to blight, is that the highest and best use for that investment? That's all I'm saying.
And I think this is a good point, because, I mean, we're not the only community that's in this boat. And so, I mean, it's something that's discussed at League of Oregon Cities, it's something that's discussed in many municipalities in California. How we've done things, how we've collected funds, our urban renewal districts, our special taxing districts, even our bonds that some communities are not able to even pass for major life safety issues. This is new for us, but I think it's almost beyond just the Parks Commission, is looking at how does our city operate, how do each of our districts and our funds collected, and then I know a lot of cities have gone through and looked at the build out possibility of what's left to build out in the community, what the potential tax revenue are from those, and see when's their drop dead date, when's the date of how much their tax revenue and how much inflation exists, and, you know, some cities only have about 5-7 years before they're broke completely. So I don't think we've done those studies yet. They're pretty intense, but this is a conversation that we need to be included in because of parks, but it's also a little bit beyond.
Yeah, it's a city council discussion as to the value of that program.
I'm not an urban renewal expert, but don't pretend to be. But it is really complicated. And, you know, I'm kind of hearing what Coco is saying, that maybe you don't need to disband the urban rural district, but you use the funds for something else, some of the funds for something else. And I mean, my understanding of what funds the urban renewal, what things the urban renewal can fund are very restricted.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they could do. I think urban renewals always have to stay in debt, and that's how they thrive. You know, I'm certainly not against looking at whatever would be reasonable to do there. I know the city, whenever they have an urban renewal district issue, actually hires somebody, an urban renewal expert, to come in and tell them, because when the urban renewal district in Empire was expanded to include part of Tapas Park to consider funding for the library building out there, they brought somebody in again, you know, and had to go through all of that to look at what was feasible. And you know, urban renewal, I'm not trying to be an urban renewal fan, but I'm saying that if urban renewal is administrated well, it can probably accomplish some good things. And if it's not, it doesn't. So I agree with Coco. Sometimes we do things, and what we do is remove the problem. It's supposed to get rid of blight. Well, we just move the blight around a little bit. But I will tell you, the expansion for the library, where the children's section now was in the Coos Bay and the downtown area, was funded by Urban Renewal District. So it wasn't a taxable asset, but it did something in the downtown area that didn't increase blight somewhere else. So part of it's how it's administered, I think, as well. So complicated issue, but I think it's a good thing to consider.
And also, I mean, because we looked at the expansion into Toppets, which is very complicated, but looking at maybe it should be expanded to more of the park assets so that we can utilize funds there. But it's a complicated issue, but I think here is a mechanism, and whether it's working or not working is something to look at.
There's a limit to how big the urban renewal district can be, and I know when we expanded into Tapas Park, it was right at the limit of what they could do.
Yep.
It also includes some of the dredge spoils out in the bay. I don't get that.
Because if you have catastrophic. So on the spoils and things like that, I understand that, because your watershed is important. It goes into your drinking water and your what we call agribusiness. Our tax base in Oregon is agribusiness. That's why we have a split tax. It's due July 1, it rolls, and we don't pay it till the timber and the cattle are slain or whatever, so we're not getting it for quite a while. But the point that I was making is, at some point, you should look at some of the urban renewal, not necessarily dissolving it, but rethinking it as, what is your return on investment initially, and then what is the return on those assets? Because if all the assets in your urban renewal are not bringing new traffic and new revenue at the current tax base, not the 15-year held for historic preservation, et cetera, then you're heavily debted at the expense of anything else getting repaired, renewed, or fixed. That's the point I was making. So not necessarily dissolve. I think it's called rethinking ROI and ROA. That's what anybody else does. If you go in the stock market, and your bonds are looked at in the same way when you do bonds.
I guess what I'm seeing is, since you can't use the URA for specific things, it would have, like, that taxing district exists, so the taxing base exists, but you'd have to change it, and I don't think anything would fit within the URA that we're talking about, so it feels like it would have to be dissolved.
The boardwalk.
The boardwalk is
I mean, maybe
a big
maybe
one.
it's we push through and we get anything that's in the URA done.
Yeah, well, you know, you use that vehicle while it lasts, and then you go to a different direction. I don't know. It's a good question, and honestly, I do have a hard time understanding urban renewal, and I am in part, supposed to be deciding how it's used. And so I'd actually like to ask the city council or the urban renewal agency if we can have just maybe a little information session at the next URA board meeting to talk about how it is used, what are the ways we can use it, just so we can have a little refresher, if not for all of us who are voting on it, but for everybody in the audience. And then also, let's have a discussion on the ROI on that one. Its real impact. Where do we see the impact being, best value for the city of Coos Bay and for, our citizens, and our help with some general planning for goal setting in the URA? Because I see that as, we have reached our maximum tax percentage, taxable compression, so we can't do anything more without compressing all of our other partners in taxing districts. So the one that exists, that maybe could be amended or moved or rethought. I don't know, it makes sense. And then I just wanted to kind of circle back to the foundation, if that's okay. I'm assuming
Yeah.
this is very informal.
Very informal.
Just kind of.
We're only formally sat here because we're
Yeah,
not at the fire
gotcha.
station. So.
I kind of like the idea of like a roadmap of, next steps for building some kind of increased revenue for the parks, and starting with the foundation. Basically, because what I see is, follow me on my path here. We get the foundation, we have a place where people can donate, where they can, write the Parks Association or the Parks Foundation into the Royal Trust. And then from there, maybe doing a pilot program on some kind of prepared food and beverage thing, where you get some restaurants who are willing to participate in trying this, which allows them to establish some kind of fee that just goes on every bill, and then they get to donate to the Parks Commission, which then they get a donation receipt on. And then from there, we can see how that works. What are the restaurants experiencing? Maybe we try it on a day or a week or a month or whatever. We just see what that looks like for these businesses, see how that affects everybody. And then from there, we'll have some data on what that is doing to the business's bottom line, and then maybe we could jump it up to full city, both cities. We're, North Bend's off on their own, but, I see that as a way for, it's not the city taking it, it's like something that the businesses then get to donate, participatory at first. I don't know.
And that's a good question too, is, if we move forward in this direction and we look at the food and beverage helper fee, and we look at easier fundraising, easier for donors to donate, whether alive or deceased, I think that's good. And then look at, could it be something that we do both cities? I don't know how that looks. It gets complicated.
I imagine if it works, then they will be like, oh, we want to make that work too, but,
Yeah.
I can just say from the water board, when you have an entity that is between the tail of two cities, and one wants to do something and one doesn't want to do something, and there's an opportunity and then you can't take it, that's not a very good position to be in. And there's a long history of that. So I think keeping it in your wheelhouse is probably the best thing to do. Because as you start expanding into something else, it gets more complicated, and every time you get more complicated, you get two sets of lawyers, two sets of accounting principles, two sets of debt expenditures. So that's just a thought. the Adopt a Park program has gotten a lot of data and has a lot of forms that are already approved. And there's no one, unless you have a full-time coordinator, that can run that program.
Yeah.
But we did get a lot of outreach and a lot of feedback from people, like people from Hauser and Lakeside come in and dump their garbage in the park because they don't want to pay to have it picked up when you're out of town. And apparently, it's common knowledge, because someone that was at the dog strut mentioned that to me when they moved here. They asked a neighbor, and they said, oh, we don't pay for garbage out here. We just take it into town and dump it in the park.
Yeah, that's real common.
And, you know, that's something that there's already laws on the books, and having an entity that doesn't take up city staffing that can help with see something, say something, you know, getting that behavior stopped is one of the big equations, because a lot of your volunteers are getting burned out coming in and just cleaning up the same dump pile. And I'm not talking about unhoused people that have mental health issues. I'm talking about that giant turkey from Walmart that's 30 pounds and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. So there's a lot of things, but I think we have a framework, and if creating a foundation is one of the ways to look at it, that's true. But again, as Kurt said, I'm going to point to Shore Acres. After COVID, a lot of the people that got involved in running things for decades that were very successful fell off, and now it's like we're scrambling to get back to that capacity. And those friends groups for parks like Shampooey, Shore Acres, you know, the lighthouses have been very successful, but when you don't have that next generation coming in, that's where you have to have those junior ranger programs and that school outreach, or you lose generations of wanting to give back and wanting to volunteer. And I think clubs like the Lions Club and Rotary, and I mean, I can go down a whole list, have seen that. Yeah, so it's just another thing to keep in mind, and that's why I'm looking at the pots of money that you already have, so that the responsibility ultimately falls on the city, no matter who's involved. So it's tough, but
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if you want the roadmap for foundations, the simple one is find a group of people that you know want to be involved as directors of the foundation, write bylaws, have to get a little bit of seed money, have to file with the state and IRS to get your nonprofit 501c3 status, and then once you're approved, then you go ahead and do what you need to do based on your bylaws. I know when we started ours, one of the longest delays, of course, was IRS in getting the 501c3 status. There's not a lot of expense. I mean, we rent a post office box. We have to pay fees, a fee to the state every year. It's like $50. It's not much at all. Of course, we buy our own stuff too. We have our own laptop and our own software for keeping all of our own accounts. And our treasurer does that. Our treasurer is a retired CPA. But it really does, you really do need the people that want to be involved and stay involved. Look at this group, or look at any group. I mean, trying to find people to serve on the Parks Board, or trying to find people to serve on any board where they're not getting paid. You know, you have to have some people that have some energy, that have an interest and really want to do it. So it's an avenue. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing for us is being able to do fundraisers, but the wills and estates are really a big thing, and a lot of foundations really focus on that. The library doesn't as much as it should. So,
is there a group already in existence that could be seen as somebody that would take on this task in this community?
I think it would be a newly organic formed group. All the groups that are out there are, to my knowledge, specific. There's the skate park group, there's the Choshi Gardens, there is, there's each group that has something very specific, their focus. So I think it would, maybe people from that group, a representative from each of those would be beneficial, but.
yeah, and I guess the other thing for the foundation of all these different options are, we don't take up any staff time. Mm-hmm. Because we're the volunteers, we're the people that run the foundation, mm-hmm. And so there isn't any requirement that we have a Jennifer or Greg come to our meetings and we take up their time. So it's an advantage from that standpoint too, so.
And for me, Coco, and if you didn't think this would work, but I think because the pilot program has worked so well, but we need staff time. Well, it's a success. But we need time. We need people who are dedicated volunteers that isn't staff time, because that's limited. And so I could see the foundation, the focus for the first year is getting that Friends program really fully implemented and doing the quarterly projects. And then maybe tackling some of the bigger projects as well, and continuing on with the community cabin.
They do need to have a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement with the city, because ultimately, regardless, the assets are the liability, and no disrespect to a building, but when you're adding waterways, recreational immunity, the type of assets that are involved in parks, boat ramps, boardwalks, I think there has to be somewhat of a component that is planted in the city that's the responsive, and they can be on the board of a foundation, but I think there has to be that kind of liaison compared to other boards. That's just my opinion, because otherwise things can drift.
Yeah.
And I know Shore Acres, that was one of the agreements with the Friends groups with parks, is there has to be someone from the state parks on the board. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because of the type of assets and the things that can happen. So that's just an opinion.
It's a good opinion, and I will tell you, the Library Foundation in the bylaws requires that we have the current library director on the board. It requires that the library board of trustees appoint 2 members to the foundation board. It requires that we have a member from the Friends of the Library that do the book sales. And that is important, because that ties in the liaison with the city. We don't have any memorandum of understanding, however. The way we have always done things is, if the city needs some assistance from us, they ask, or if we want to propose something to them, we go to it. For example, the library was painted a few years ago. We paid for half of that, and the city paid for half of that. We didn't have a memorandum of understanding. They wanted to paint the library. They came to us and said, "Can you guys help us?" And we said, "Yeah, we'll pay for half of it." So.
Well, I want to start a foundation. Is there any problem with being a foundation member, board member, if you're on the Parks Commission as well?
We limited the Board of Trustees. We've talked about this with subcommittees, right? You run into the problem about worrying about having quorums from another board. So the library board has 7 members. The Board of Trustees, we've limited it on the foundation that they can only 2 of them can be members. Because then we never have to worry about that, right? And we don't have to post when the meetings are in the public or anything at all like that. I mean, we record them, and we actually keep the minutes and everything on the library website, but we're not required to do that. And we take public comments if people want to have one, just like you guys do. But no, we have 2 people from the library board. The other thing I will tell you is, don't expect immediate success with the foundation. It's years down the road when you start developing a database of donors, when you start getting your name known to people that administer grants. It's not all of a sudden tomorrow the parks is going to have a bunch of money from a foundation.
Yeah.
It's a lot like the urban renewal district thing. You're looking at years to really get it going well. So.
I guess for me, starting the conversation about a food and beverage tax or fee of some sort, it would be easier if there was a way to do that voluntarily, to have that discussion before you're like, we're going to do a tax, and immediately people are like, I hate taxes, no way. It's like I don't know, I see it as a way to crack open that conversation.
Evolution, this is your...
Oh, that's the, okay, yeah. So, I don't know, that's where I'm at. I feel like the foundation is a really good first step towards allowing us to start building some extra funds for the parks, even though I realize it's not gonna be overnight. We're gonna have $10 million in that pot, but, you know, you never know.
Well, and I think, and to speak to you, Coco, for the accountability, so that it can be the fundraising mechanism, but that foundation isn't gonna be like, okay, well, we're gonna, you know, rebuild the gazebo, and they're gonna go out and do it. Everything still has to come back through here.
There's always going to be a capacity component of the city because ultimately it's public lands and there may be more than one entity involved. So, but I do agree that looking at a foundation, there's nothing wrong with looking at a food and beverage tax. We've got other entities that have done it that have a blueprint of many, many decades. It's just that I don't think you should put all your eggs in one particular basket. And I do think you need to get some of the capacity back that you had for decades before 1980, when two things happened. The primary went to 29.5 and a lot of businesses shut down. And then it was to get economic development. And that's fine, but I think you still have to have a place that makes people want to be here and stay here. And that's looking at public lands because that's where you see it the most.
And that is a big reason why many people locate here. People can work from home now, and they make great money, and they can sit in their living room, and then when they're done with that, and they're done working, and they log out for the day, they go outside. And the majority of my clients are moving here because we have beaches, we have parks, we have the boardwalk, they have safe places to walk, and they don't have a fee that they have to pay every time they go to Mingus Park. They don't have a fee every time they have to pay, versus a lot of our neighboring states. Every single park they go to, they have to pay a pass for.
So I keep remembering things about foundations. I'm going to shut up, but all those things I said you need to do, you do. But I will also tell you we have done other things too. Obviously, we have director's insurance. We have liability insurance. We have cyber insurance because between donations and other stuff, you know, you have to have somebody do audits, you know, and so there are other expenses too that you need to think about when you're setting up a foundation, and particularly when it grows, because you really do have a fiduciary responsibility. And then the last thing I was going to tell you is, you know, we take people that just say we want to give money to the foundation, but they may also dedicate it to something. In other words, they may say, yeah, I'm going to give you $100,000, but it has to go to the community building and Mingus Park, and we have to honor that. Yeah.
Should we look at the time, maybe I'm hearing that maybe looking at 3 of the things that seem to be bubbling up, which is exploring further a gas, not a gas, but a food and beverage tax, a foundation, and then looking at something with a better explanation of the urban renewal districts that we have, and what the bond life and the indebtedness and encumbrances are on those, and if some of that might be available to go back into funding. Because when you pass your taxable budgets, you may have a base of, your permanent base might be $1.50 per thousand, but you don't have to tax it $1.50 per thousand. Believe it or not, you can say, well, you know, we don't have a lot going on here, we're only going to tax it 50 cents per thousand this year. You never see it because that's why the joke is as soon as you get it, you're never going to let it go. But there is no requirement that you have to tax at your max base. It's just no one ever does. You can go below that. So it's just there are things, it's still a base. But I would like us to, if possible, make a motion to explore maybe the explanation that you said, Carmen, on explaining a little bit more on how the city uses the 2 urban renewal districts and what their ROI, ROA longevity plan is, and then maybe looking at exploring the food and beverage tax and a 501 foundation.
So we don't, because it's technically a work session,
Right.
we don't take a motion, but I think that if we can take a consensus.
Yeah,
And
if we
so-
can like narrow it down.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is, and Jamie, go ahead.
I just wanted to know if there's a way to get some sort of meeting set up for the urban renewal tutoring.
Let's see.
I have a feeling I could request a urban renewal explanation or like URA for dummies kind of presentation.
Well, our October 3rd work session, we don't currently have an agenda for.
Oh, you want it
So-
to be for here? The URA, like finance department maybe comes and explains it to the Parks Commission.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, either way. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to hear it, and I was thinking I could hear it through the URA, so the URA could ask the question of, are we doing this right? Because right now, we are the, ones responsible for those funds, and, dictation of where those funds are gonna go. So maybe we need to plan on what that looks like, and then ultimately, it would be the URA's decision to go one way or the other, to shift focus or funding.
Well, I think it would be beneficial at the October 3rd meeting to have either where it's our URA or somebody from the city or someone that can explain our current status in our debt in all of those parts and pieces.
It could be helpful.
Yeah.
Although, I have a feeling it's gonna be a hard sell
Yeah,
to change the URA.
none of these are gonna be easy.
No, well, I think the easiest one is the foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
But like, that's something we could do, and I don't see anybody being like, no, don't do that. But I do see the URA being like, well, we have it, we're not giving it up.
Yeah.
But, if you ask the right questions and say, what do we actually want to accomplish with these funds? Because, if you're not using them in URA, then you're still able to tax at that level, so maybe we shift what the URA is.
And maybe it is looking at the assets that we do have that are which are limited, and then looking at those assets and then pursuing some improvements there, so.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think getting the boardwalk done would be huge. As a recommendation-based body, really pushing on the URA to do something on the park, or on the boardwalk and the docks would be beneficial. We have a lot of applications come in for improvements, building improvements. Maybe the parks just needs to come in and ask for improvements on the boardwalk.
One other thing that I think we have a general consensus that those are the three items, those are the three top that we've discussed today. So we'll move forward with those. And then I'm assuming we haven't discussed the upcoming joint council work session. Did we discuss that before we got here?
Not yet,
Okay.
no.
All right, let's roll through that. And what day is that again?
So, the July 18th, 2024 Parks Commission meeting, the commission recommended the following goals be brought to council to discuss during the September 24th joint council work session meeting. So the meeting is scheduled for September 24th at 6 o'clock p.m. right here in this room. The intention is to have the entire Parks Commission body attend that meeting to discuss two-year goal setting. And then also at that work session, there are two other items that the council moved from the August 6th meeting, and that is the consideration to approve the Cheryl's Design Front Street to a more public meeting. They want to engage public comment at that meeting, so we did send a letter out to the surrounding areas for the entire route, going from Front Street all the way over to Mingus Park. And then the other item for discussion at that meeting is the consideration to create a Parks Commission fact-finding committee for bike and ped facilities. So this body's input at that work session is going to be important. So
We have a timer waiting for this council to get that.
6 o'clock p.m. is the scheduled time for the work
In
session.
here or fire?
Yep.
Here.
Okay.
So we hope that you guys can all come. I think Kurt sent a email earlier this week, was it?
Yeah, it was just you.
asking a question
Yeah.
about, should we talk about this upcoming work session?
Yeah, I wasn't sure of the date. I'd forgotten it's that late in September, but it's probably good that we kind of know what we're doing anyways. I think it's great if everybody from the Parks Commission can attend. But I'll be happy if that happens, but I kind of doubt that, people may have conflicts. They may just not be able to attend. But I do think even if everybody did, everybody that's on the Parks Commission can't talk about it. It kind of seems like we ought to have somebody.
I always get in trouble from yelling from the audience.
That kind of seems like we should have a lead person, maybe on one issue and a lead person on the other issue, kind of talk about those things and talk about how the Parks Commission came up to the decisions they did to make those recommendations to the City Council. I think it's important. Now, I'm going to ask a question here. It's my understanding that Eric has resigned?
Yes.
Correct. Right. And so, he probably would have been the person to talk about the Sharrows project to some degree, since he was one of the people that started that.
Yeah, and that he knows more about it, and they take public comment, whether or not it's related. So it's related to the specific
Well, he called me, and I understand that he called some of you as well. And so I said, well, will you be there for the City Council's work session? Sometimes I say things that are inappropriate, but I'm just going to say it anyways. I think his feelings are a little hurt. And so when I said that, well, will you show up at the public meeting with the City Council work session to talk about the Sharrows project? And the answer that I got was, if I'm invited.
Mm-hmm. So I had a conversation with him earlier today about that, and given that he does know more about that particular topic than the rest of us, I think it is beneficial for him to be in attendance to answer questions for that. I don't think he needs to do it for each of our topics, of course, because I think each of us could take it.
And the thing that I think we have to tiptoe around a little bit is, if the City Council is asking the recommendation from the Parks Commission, him no longer being a member of the Parks Commission, he can't present the Parks Commission's position on the Sharrows project.
I think it would be beneficial, because he was so involved in it, to be there to answer questions about the project specifically, not about the Parks Commission's view. Yes. Yeah.
Just so I can clarify, the item that's on here, 2 of the items on the background for the actions that we're going to be discussing are being removed or pended because they're on something else. Did I understand that correctly?
No, they were moved to that.
Oh.
From them making a decision in
Oh,
August.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have time to talk about all those things.
We're going to make time.
No,
Council and the work session, we're going to make time.
So, the meeting's max is what, 3 hours, 6 to 9? I think what I would like to suggest, if that's okay, is if we send out a draft staff report, because we want to make sure we are presenting to council what you folks want us to present to council. We've got the August 6th draft reports, staff reports. I think I'll just send those to you. For us, they're due Wednesday at noon, but I can get you those. Would you mind sending them over tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then we can work on the commission goals. But that's a little bit easier, because we already have a staff report for that, that we presented to you folks. So, does that sound like a good plan?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, as many people as possible to be there. I think it's beneficial. I know very little about the Sharrows, so I think having Eric here to discuss that's important. And I'm more than happy to be the push and advocate for the item for the separate committee, the fact-finding committee. So.
So our staff report actually didn't say that.
Yeah.
So if that's something that you want us to put in there as a consideration, then we can. So.
Yeah. Well, I want it to be a whole separate commission.
I understand. Yeah, I agree. One thing that you may want to do is you may want to watch the August 6th council meeting.
Yes.
I think there were some concerns specifically to the Sharrows project. Staff does not, I'm just delivering this message, but I think there were some concerns that, is this the best use of money at this time? I think they shared some of your thoughts where, should we be looking at a citywide plan before we move forward with this specific project? And just be prepared to answer that question, or anyways.
I was at that meeting, and the mayor, I think, brought up the issue about money and a citywide plan. I think the other concerns were not taking into public input from people who may be affected, the businesses along the street, commercial street, not really getting input from them. And maybe it may actually even require a public meeting. So in other words, you're asking the city council to approve something without actually maybe holding a public meeting for the people that are affected. So that was his other concern. And then he also had a concern, of course, the one we've discussed an awful lot, about the Market Street crossing across Highway 101 going north. He considered that a real safety issue, and would we be opening, I think the intent was, would we be opening the city up for more liability if we had an established path as opposed to people just doing it on their own, but we didn't provide a way for them to safely cross that intersection. So those were the concerns that I got out of that one. The subcommittee one, the concern I heard mentioned was a concern about staff time. I think the city council, and Carmen can talk to this, I get the impression the city council as a whole would not like to see a proliferation of committees, but they're actually worried about staff time. And I think if the argument is presented to them that this is basically an information gathering group that's going to provide information to the Parks Commission to make decisions, that it's not really doesn't have to be a public meeting forum, that staff doesn't even need to be present at those meetings, and that group can just carry on and bring all the information that it finds to the Parks Commission. So in some respects, it may actually save staff some time. And then my second argument for that group would be, and I think it's one we've talked about, we spend an awful lot of time talking about pedestrian and bike stuff. It's important, I get it. But I also think that the rest of the park system kind of gets set back a little bit because of that. And so if there's a more efficient way for someone to get us lots of information so that we don't kick the ball around a lot up here and can focus on the entire park system, not just pedestrian and bicycle stuff, that's an advantage for the city as well. So if we can get around the public meeting rules so we don't have to take up staff time, we may actually improve the Parks Commission process by making it more efficient and letting it focus on other issues that the parks face, like funding, then that would be a good thing.
So you're going to speak on that?
No,
I was just going to say that. I mean,
Go.
I can speak on any of those things as well, but you did a very eloquent job at explaining that. And I think that, at least from the council's perspective, the fact-finding committee and the Sharrows thing, the whole bike issue is like this big black box that they didn't really feel they were ready to open up at that moment. And so it got pushed to the work session so that we could open it up in an informal.
Initially got pushed to parks.
Yes. Well, no, I mean, when it came up at the council meeting, it was like, whoa, there's a lot, and we want more time to have more input from the community. So let's just lump all those things together and put it over here and we'll talk about it. So I think that's where it came from.
I think that whenever you're into anything transportation-wise, whether it's multimodal, equestrian trails, whatever, that should be its own thing, because an average citizen cannot go out and is prohibited to go out unless it's on private property and do anything with roadways, sidewalks, et cetera, and there's a reason for that. And I think it certainly needs the time and attention, just like anything else, but a lot of individuals may not be aware of the complexities of that when you're making changes. And I think having a transportation committee would be the best thing, because there's a lot of people that are moving to have off-highway vehicles and all-terrain vehicles on roadways of 25 or less, and that's already passed in a lot of counties and areas. So there's a lot of issues with transportation that I think are beyond just having it in one silo. It needs to be a comprehensive thing, and unless you have a transportation committee, it gets siloed, and then you're redoing it every 10 or 15 years because there wasn't the connectivity that someone thought.
And I agree with what Coco said. I mean, I think when this originally started, of course, they found pedestrians and bikes in the ordinance for the Parks Commission, and well, that's a great place to put it. You know, and they didn't want to form a transportation committee. I personally think a transportation committee is a better way to go, kind of around to some degree. But I don't think the city council's going to go there, and this fact-finding group to do pedestrian and bike things is kind of a halfway point. So,
It's a good start.
yeah.
Well, we advocate at the next budget meeting for a separate commission.
So I do want to just follow up in regards to the upcoming work session on the 24th, that it is our intention that the council and the Parks Commission will be up on the dais.
Okay.
So there'll be space for everybody
Okay.
up here. So it won't be yelling from the gallery.
Okay.
So you won't.
Like I usually do.
Yeah, you probably won't get yelled at.
We may add tables, but that is, we're gonna
That-
try to
that's
make it
our
work.
intention.
I do, because I do get in trouble every time, just from yelling from the audience. 'cause
Can't
I'm not
imagine
very
that at all. All
Will
right.
you be designating the subject matter experts for each one of these so that they can, if somebody has a question from the city council, for example, on these, like on the grants, that would,
I think if it's okay, what we'll do is, I'll take the lead by directing their questions to whoever on the Parks Commission is the most versed.
just so that person is prepared.
Or in attendance.
Yeah, or in
Prepared or in
attendance,
attendance, and that was my.
yeah. We need you to be prepared for all of it, Coco.
I know nothing.
Oh, yeah, she won't be prepared. Yeah, right. You're always prepared. You're gonna be just fine.
Do we have any other additional commissioner comments or items that we'd like to review and discuss?
Nothing to review, but I do have I know, it was for time to go. I have one comment. You know, since the law has recently changed about what we do with the unhoused, and we've fenced in a lot down here for development and to keep people out of it, I get that. I have to tell you, I live kind of up where one of our other council members, commissioners live, and the road that is right above Mingus pool, Cedar? Is that the road that's
The one
right?
that- right adjacent to the pool?
Right above
Yeah,
it,
that's-
yeah. I walk that because there's a trail that goes on the backside, and that's one way I get back to the house. And I walk the dog, my kid's dog and stuff. There's a sewer line that runs up there. It's partially paved. I have walked that thing forever, and I've never seen anything in there. And my kids were at Sun River this last weekend. I walked their dog on that trail, and I found 2 encampments with stuff. And it kind of gets to Crystal's thing about sometimes Coco's thing, excuse me. Sometimes we just push the problem to a different place. And I'm afraid with some of the things that we're doing now, the Parks Commission needs to be aware that we may be pushing the unhoused more into the parks than we have before. And it may become even more of an issue. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Any, Coco?
Yes, I wanted to give a shout out to the Dog Days of Summer. We did have a pilot event with people who use John Toppett's Park all the time. We got a lot of feedback from community members. We got a lot of feedback from the Soulmates and the Park Pack, which are ever expanding their walking groups. And we did get some donations to start redoing the trail markers on that situation and a couple of the benches. We're going to be having a meeting with the city on how we interface that because we don't have a comprehensive trail system. And most of the places, that's something that there's different people in the community that like to do that kind of thing. And when you look at like the Appalachian Trail or others, those are only kept up because you have different groups at different points that in the wintertime they use their routers or whatever and they get that put together. So we're going to do that pilot in October and November to try to get those in. We want to make sure we're respectfully and carefully replacing exactly where we are so we're not disturbing other things. But there was a lot of people that were really excited about it, but there were also brought up some questions about on a Saturday at one of the busiest times in our community for tourism and other people coming in, people were setting up tents and doing their shenanigans within a stone's throw of the host site. the restrooms, the playground, and Bay Area Hospital security would drive in and talk to us because they have that daycare center. And we're losing control because other places north and south of us have control, and it just pushes it here. And it's always been there. It's just going to get worse because we don't have a presence or enforcement, and that's something that needs to be addressed at some point. But hopefully the fire marshal grant that we were hoping to get for clearing the brush and, you know, doing that visibility lines where you clear brush and stuff. But there's a lot of people that really love Toppets Park, and they're growing in their numbers of hiking and taking their pets with Friends of Coos County Animals. Those shelter pets, our shelters are at capacity, and getting exercise and being out in our park. And there's a lot of grants that have come into Coos County over the decades for those very things. So it's a good partnership and opportunities for a lot of health and wellness things. So yay, thank you for Amy and Christina helping and all those people. So it's pretty good.
Awesome.
Thank you. Carmen, any closing comments?
Done here.
Jamie? Okay. Kurt, we already went to you. I just want to turn these over to Coco. These are the deed records for Mingus Park. So shout out to Ticor Title. They went through each of the maps and tax lot numbers and did the deed research for Mingus Park, because we found that, no offense, but the city file was missing quite a few. I think that's because of a scanning error, because every other page was missing. On quite a few of them. So big shout out to Ticor Title. They volunteered their time and donated it to put this together for us. So. Okay, perfect. I do, yeah, I'll email that to you. Okay, perfect. And so we have that completed, which is great. And so shout out for them. And then also, if you guys have not had enough parks for the evening, if you want to go over starting from 6 to 7:30 at the Airport Heights Park, the consultants for the revitalization of that park are presenting 3 ideas. If you want to kind of take a look at see what that process looks like. And there's also hot dogs and hamburgers. Come on over to Airport Heights in about a half hour. So, all right.
And those will actually go to the city after I peruse them. Mainly the important thing is that there's a lot of misinformation about deeds, and
we did not find any deed restrictions.
there are no deed restrictions.
Yeah, so that, we went through it and we could not find any.
That the
unless
Civil
there's-
Rights Act didn't take care of, I'll clarify that, but.
Yeah, so we didn't find any specific deed restrictions, at least for the Mingus Park territories. But there are, I think, 2 that may have not actually, the city didn't get reported, but we can discuss that later. So shout out to Ticor for that. Head over to Airport Heights if you would like to this evening, and thank you so much. One more thing, Jennifer.
Real quick, this Friday, 8 a.m., we're going to show Finding Nemo at 3rd and Central, so come see a movie in the parking lot.
8
Yeah.
p.m.?
8 p.m.?
8 p.m.
Did I say a.m.?
You did.
Okay, 8 p.m.
Okay.
And then Cricket, just to follow up, and Kurt, we do have a community resource officer that does go in when these things are reported. So we do have our See Something, Say Something campaign out there. So, you know, we try to see everything. We try to be able to say everything. But when these issues do come up, please bring it to our attention. We can definitely make sure we reach out to the community resource officer, because
Yeah,
we
one
make
of the
sure our parks are
questions,
safe for all of the users.
they were hoping that QR codes might, they're supposed to be at each of the paved entrances. When you look at the map online for Toppets Park, a kiosk. I haven't personally looked to see that they're all there. If we could get that QR code inside or even on the outside where it wouldn't be damaged too much, that might help people.
Well, each one of our parks has a parks rules sign. I'm sure
Right.
we can maybe find a place to put that QR code there.
But on the other entrances, because a lot of neighborhood people walk and they came and gave me an earful. But that's good, because I got both ears full.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I would say the community resource officer has been absolutely amazing and very, very helpful.
We've had good luck over the course, since I've been with the city. The previous resource officer was fantastic at his job. The current resource officer, fantastic at his job. So just keep that information coming at us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone being here, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
There's on that Cedar Street, on the west, at the end of that Cedar Street in Williamsburg, there's a chain across there so people won't drive up there. The first time I walked up there, all the stuff from the first one was there.